Welcome back to Christology. This is Mr. George, and it is Thursday, April the 23rd. You can see in front of you right now the Google Doc with today's work on it, this video lecture first of all, and the slides that'll go along with it. Your one assignment for today, both your primary assignment and what counts as your attendance assignment, is a 10-question, 10-minute quiz in MyCC. And just like I said on Tuesday, it covers a few questions from C.S. Lewis's own life, the biographical details of when he was born, when he died, everything that happened in between. Also, a few questions from what we've read in Mere Christianity, and most recently, the chapter, The Three Parts of Morality. Again, that quiz is not in Google Forms. You'll find it in MyCC. You do not have unlimited time. It is only 10 minutes that you have. So make sure you review this material, review the slides from last week and from this week on C.S. Lewis in order to be prepared for that quiz. Again, no attendance assignment. That quiz you have to have done by 3 p.m. Once you've taken that, the new subject for today, and what's to bring together all of these conversations from morality and theology of the body, is the subject of the Church's teaching on homosexuality. A lot of times this question comes up in the conversation about theology of the body, as we're talking about the Church's teachings on morality and relationships and sex. And I would say that this is one of the Church's most misunderstood teachings. Besides this video lecture, I'm also embedding for you a video that's a 38-minute documentary entitled The Third Way. The first half of the documentary is testimonies from Christians who experience same-sex attraction, and the second half presents a more complete understanding of the Church's teaching on the subject. Again, no obligation to watch through all or any of that, but if you have the time and you want to look further into the subject and to hear from people who actually experience what it's like to be a Christian who is also a homosexual or experiences same-sex attractions. Again, I think that video encapsulates church teaching really well. You can see below, once again, the schedule, check marks for the days that we've covered over the past couple of weeks, and you can see the schedule both of topics and of tests and quizzes going forward. Again, to take a look at your primary job for today, it's very simply to finish that 10-question quiz in MyCC. Make sure that you've done all the things you need to do to secure that in terms of your Wi-Fi connection being secure, making sure you don't close that tab. By 3 p.m. today, 10 questions, you have 10 minutes to finish. Again, that quiz covers a number of topics following on Mr. Godfrey's Theology of the Body lectures. Specifically, C.S. Lewis, biographical details, some of the contents of the law of human nature, and some objections from his book, Mere Christianity, as well as some of the contents from the three parts of morality. Again, review back through this set of brief slides, as well as the slides from last week, should equip you pretty well to be successful in this 10-minute, 10-question quiz. Major topic for today, finishing up our conversation about morality and the theology of the body. Why does the Church teach what it does about homosexuality? Like a lot of these other questions surrounding sex and relationships, a lot of times you wonder, why does the Church get involved in these questions at all? Why doesn't the Church just stick to religion? Why is the Church trying to butt into people's lives and tell people how to live and so forth? Before we get into all that, I think it's worthwhile to sort of line up what we do and what we don't believe as Christians, as Catholics, about homosexuality as a whole. Because again, this is one of the Church's most misunderstood teachings. What does the Church teach on the subject of homosexuality? The Church teaches that homosexual persons are created and loved by God, that God has a purpose for homosexual persons in the same way he has a purpose for everybody else, that God loves and desires the good of homosexual persons as much as anybody else. How do you know that that's the Christian teaching? If you just take the word homosexual out, that God loves all persons and created all persons to find happiness, to find joy in their lives. Ultimately, God created all persons of whatever background, orientation, whatever time they lived in, that God created all persons to be happy with him forever in heaven. That like every other person, that people with same-sex attractions have and deserve every human right. And like every other person, that homosexual persons are called to God, by God, to chastity. What does chastity mean? It means honoring other persons as persons and not treating them like objects, like trophies, like conquests. So no matter who you are, we believe once again that you are loved and created by God, that you deserve to have every right and all of your dignity honored, and that you're called to God by chastity. That being said, even just from a biological perspective, when we look at the human person and when we look at the relationship between men and women, not because the Catholic Church is a tyrant that tries to make people live a certain way, but even just in our biology and the very way we're designed or evolved, there's something unique about the relationship between men and women. It's the only relationship in existence that can result in new human life. And we believe what honors the ability we have to bring new life into the world through sex is what is morally good. And what goes afield of that, what goes astray of that unique biological relationship, is a disorder or a misunderstanding of what sex is about. We do believe that that sexual acts besides sex between a man and a woman in the permanent and committed context of marriage, we believe that homosexual acts are distortions of what sex is designed and evolved to be. What does that mean about homosexual persons? Created and loved by God. But we believe to act sexually on those attractions is something for which biologically we are not equipped, and which is not just another way of expressing the kind of sex that can be fruitful in new life between a man and a woman. As far as the Catholic Church is concerned, it's our understanding that from God, sacramental marriage can only exist between a man and a woman, that even if two women were to say all the same vows at the altar in a Catholic church, that as a sacrament, that marriage can only exist between a man and a woman. We also would say as Catholics that in a society that it's critical that we recognize and in a certain sense protect and enshrine the one unique relationship that can result in new life in new citizens. So we would say, as Catholics, that civil marriage, marriage from the perspective of society, should also be recognized as only existing between a man and a woman. If two gay persons decide they want to live their lives together, again, we would never say that anybody should stop them. Even if we wanted to, the church doesn't have a secret police force that goes out and tries to find gay people and prevent them from having relationships. That being said, it is the case that in a society, marriage between men and women plays a unique role. It keeps biological children united together with their parents in a permanent relationship. Where marriage exists in a society, it helps that permanence, which every metric suggests to us is the best circumstance for children to live in. That behaviorally, socially, psychologically, that when it comes to financial and educational outcomes, that statistically, children have an opportunity to know both his biological mother and biological father, and to live in a stable home with them where his parents are married, affords all sorts of benefits. And it's just the assumption of the law that custody of any child that's born belongs equally to the biological mother and biological father. So not because we think it's our role to try to break up any homosexual relationships before they happen, but simply because we believe that marriage between men and women and that unique biological relationship is critical in a society. That's why we believe that civil marriage should remain between a man and a woman, not just religiously, but from the perspective of society. Like all other persons, we believe that homosexual persons are created by God, loved by God, and that God wills their happiness and their good. So that being said, it's critical that we understand some of the things that the church definitely doesn't teach. The church does not teach that homosexuality is a sin. How do we know that? Because the church does not necessarily teach that homosexuality is a choice. We don't necessarily just wake up one day and choose who we're attracted to. And if it's not a choice, then by definition, it can't be a sin. Again, it's not my impression that a lot of people just wake up on a Saturday morning and say, I think I'll go to the zoo today. Oh, the zoo is closed. Okay, I guess I'll be gay today. The church does not teach that homosexuality is a choice that people make, and therefore, to be attracted to members of the same gender, by definition, can't be a sin. What we do with our attractions, whoever we're attracted to, can be a matter of morality, but to be attracted to members of the same gender cannot be a sin because it's not necessarily a choice. It's also worth noting that in psychology, the answer to almost every question of why we are the way we are, it's so often some mix of nature and nurture. Why is it that we act the way we do? Well, it's some mix of our hardwiring and our DNA and how we were raised in our circumstance. If that's the answer to almost every kind of conclusion we can get to, the genotype and phenotype are interacting and leads to how we are now, it seems pretty silly that we would say for homosexuality that it's something that you're either born hardwired and there's no sort of circumstance that can affect it, or that people just wake up out of the blue and decide to be gay one day because it seems like a good option. It seems to be the case, like so many other things, that who we're attracted to is probably going to be a combination both of who we are from our birth as well as the kinds of experiences we have. That being said, the church does not teach that homosexuality is a sin or a choice, or that it must only be something that we choose for ourselves, or something that's hardwired and something that could not possibly be affected by circumstance. It would definitely not be the Christian teaching that if you, for example, in your teenage years were to experience uncertainty or confusion, that automatically means anything, that automatically means you're gay or straight or anything like that. So before jumping to lifelong conclusions at the ripe old age of 15, There can be a lot of confusion across all sorts of topics that don't necessarily mean anything other than how you feel right now. Again, the church certainly doesn't teach that gay people have any kind of agenda other than just living their lives. To assume that somehow, if you disagree with gay marriage, that the people on the other side of the argument must be trying to destroy America, that's pretty silly. It's probably the case that, like any other people, people who are gay are simply trying to live their lives and trying to find happiness. And the church certainly does not teach that gay people should undergo intensive reorientation therapy, and if you just attend this seminar, that suddenly in 2 weeks you're going to find that you're not gay anymore. That's a very sticky psychological and social issue that's worthy of conversation. But the church would not simply say that you can just flip a switch and stop feeling same sex attractions and so forth. Just put together, people with same sex attractions, people who are homosexual, who identify that way, who aren't sure, are like every other person insofar as being loved by God, accepted by God, that God desires that those persons have a place in the church and a place in community. And again, although we would say that gay marriage should not be how society enshrines the ideal of marriage, and although we would also say that homosexual acts are not an expression of sex, that are simply an equivalent to the kind of sex that can result in new life, we would absolutely not teach that same sex attraction is a sin in and of itself, because it's not necessarily a choice in and of itself. Again, this might seem to open a can of worms. There might be a bunch of more questions this raises. And it'd be very much worthwhile to pursue those questions in conversation, talk to your parents. Again, feel free to touch base with Mr. Godfrey or with me as your teachers to talk about this. The main goal here is to sort of address what comes up pretty often in the theology of the body conversation, and also to get you ready for a more in-depth conversation on the subject when you get to morality junior year. So again, consider some of that, especially if that raises some questions for you. Can't encourage you enough to watch that video I've embedded for you, The Third Way, which both gives you some testimony, as well as some of the church's teachings on the subject of homosexuality. Again, stay tuned. This will come up again junior year. Hope you have a great weekend. We'll see you next Tuesday to pick up the topic of virtue, and I'll talk to you then.